Okay, this is a chat about the so-called Brindleverse. I, I hope it's the first in what might be a series of talks about the Brindleverse. So let's all go insane together. I think that sounds like a great plan. So what is the Brindleverse? The Brindleverse is the idea that many carved from Brindlewood games all take place in the same universe. Of the games that we've published or that we have in development, the ones that are part of the Brindleverse are Brindlewood Bay, the Between and all of its settings, Public Access, the forthcoming Pizza Time, By Endurance We Conquer, the forthcoming Beach Blanket Body Bag, the forthcoming Moonlight Veil, although I don't know when that's coming, and Planet Raygun. They are all part of the Brindleverse. You might be wondering about Planet Raygun, and maybe I'll talk about it later. Dead Pilled and Cherry Ice Cream Smile are two games that we have in development that don't contain any direct references to other Brindleverse games or to the Brindleverse, but I like to think they're in the same world, even though there's no real evidence of it. The Silververse's role-playing game Trophy and Arkham Herald are not part of the Brindleverse, though Trophy and the Brindleverse certainly share an aversion to wolves. Wolves are very bad in both games, and Arkham Herald contains a single Easter egg reference to the big man from Public Access. I will note here that this is full on spoilers for all these games, so if there's things you don't want to know about Shadow Society, Sons of Another World, like I'm spoiling things today. So if you're here, if you're watching this or you're here, that's what's happening. Okay, so is the Brindleverse important? That was the first thing I asked myself when I was thinking about this. Is this important? In some ways, the Brindleverse is not important at all. It is not. It is not relevant to anything. You don't need to know anything about the Brindleverse to play any of these games individually. Indeed, there have been countless sessions of Brindlewood Bay and the Between, especially played, and Public Access too, I guess. And the players have no idea that those games take place in the same universe, right? So in some ways, it's not important at all. In other ways, it's kind of the most important thing. I would say that the Brindleverse is really interesting, and I think that's what's most fun about it. Um, it- there's this like there's this idea, like whenever I'm running or writing a game, I have more fun with these Carver and Brindlewood games if I think about the Brindleverse. Even though I try not to let it influence how I make, how I make things or how I run the games, the Brindleverse is like kind of is an interesting lens through which to experience it. I do think there's a question of like who decides what's true in the Brindleverse, and I'm here to tell you that it's not me. I obviously have a lot of influence on the Brindleverse, but the truth of what things mean, they're kind of ultimately up to players and keepers, right? I mean, because especially if they run like multiple, like they run two different games with the same group of people, they might start making their own connections about what some of this stuff means, and that's good. That's what we want them doing, right? So in some sense, the truth is whatever happens at the game table. That's what we want. I I pepper things in just because I think it's fun to do as Easter eggs and stuff. And sometimes I have some notion of what I think it means, but more often than not, I'm interested to see what players and the community does with it. I think that game writers, like the people at this retreat, have a role to play here too. People who write third-party content for our games, or people who write directly for us in the Gauntlet, are free to include Brindleverse Easter eggs or outright references in their publications, right? If it's a third-party thing, I appreciate an attribution if you're going to use the Man in the Sun mask or something like that, right? But you're free to do it, and I think that those things, they are like they're not necessarily any more or less true about the Brindleverse than the things I put in my games, right? Does that make sense? Like, because on some level, we're just introducing cool things for players and keepers to have fun with, right? If you think about it, the lore of the Brindleverse like the way that we interact with it is sort of the same way that players interact with clues and solutions to the mysteries in the games, right? Like you take these seemingly interconnected bits of ephemera and you sort of weave your own theory and you kind of make your own truth of it, right? And so in that sense, it's kind of a really, really cool thing. I also think there's something interesting about the Brindleverse as and here's where I compare my creative work to Greek myth. There's something about like the Brindleverse being like the same as like mythology or like oral storytelling tradition, right? Because like I write a game and I include a pretty obvious reference to another game, or I have a character that kind of travels between games, or there's like little bits of like references, little bits of like implied lore things, and then other people, whether they be players or whether they be other game writers, they take it and put their own spin on it, and so they kind of like layer on top of this like mythology, so to speak, and we're all kind of just building this sort of mythology that like a game of telephone is like really different depending on where you're at in the line of receiving it, right? And that's how that's how myth works, right? Like oral tradition myth, we tell the story over and over again, but things get changed over time, right? And things morph, but it doesn't like stop it from being something that's valent, and salient to those people. And so I think it's another fun way of thinking about the Brindleverse. So with all that said, I do have some like big picture theories about what I think the Brindleverse means and what some of the things mean in it. I want to emphasize that my theories are not definitive. I've always been actually really hesitant to even express these theories anywhere because I think many people will take them as definitive because I express them. But they don't have to be. Like these are truly just my best guess at what's happening too. Because even like the elements that I wrote into the games, I didn't always immediately know what I was doing, right? It was on some level, it was a subconscious thing where I'm just like throwing things in there. Also, that's another thing too. Like sometimes Easter eggs and references are unintentional. Like I'll go back and I'm like, oh, you can make a case that this is a Brindleverse thing right here, right? And I didn't even mean for it to be. It was just operating on like some other level. So I want to just cover like a couple of my big theories. And really the main sort of like my current thinking on the Brindleverse is there are three really important characters that they're super important to the whole thing, right? The first character is, I call him the Wanderer, but goes by various names: the Man in the Sun Mask, the Big Man, etc. The Wanderer is one of them. A figure I call the Great Wolf King is the second one, and then the third one is Atticus Whately. I think they are the three most important figures in the broader Brindleverse lore, and here's why. So the Wanderer, this character who most players will interact with as the first time they'll meet him is as the Man in the Sun Mask in the Between, or if they play public access, it'll be the Big Man. I will say definitively that they are the same character. That's not a theory. They are the same character, right? There are other characters that are pretty strongly implied to be this character as well. Del Sol from Ghosts of El Paso, Sonny Gitano from Beach Blanket Body Bag. I'm sure there's more. There's one in Moonlight Vale. I can't remember the name of him. I know that there are. I won't get into it yet, but there's the Man in the Sun Mask. This Wanderer character figures quite prominently in the Sons of Another World settings for the Between that are coming out, particularly Court of Wolves. More on that in a moment. So this character is in lots of the different games and settings and mysteries and stuff. He makes an appearance a lot. And he always kind of functions in like a few ways. His main function is usually to make sure the player characters are keeping an open mind about things. Like that seems to be his main function. He never says anything outright. You always get the sense that he knows more than he's letting on, but for whatever reason, he won't just say it. But he is really interested in the player characters just keeping an open mind. Like, entertain the possibility that there are things out there that you don't understand, right? That seems to be kind of his main function in the story whenever he appears. It's always some version of that. He also is very associated with certain symbols: the sun, fire, light. These are all symbols that are very associated with him. And when I put a sun in something now, I'm almost always making a reference to the Man in the Sun Mask, right? If it's like a very prominent sun description. Not always, but it usually is. So that's another thing. And there's this idea that, and this is just a theory, this I don't know for sure, but there's this idea that he's protecting the world from something, or he's keeping something in check. We know this because he's very interested in these creatures called the Great Hungers, who figure prominently in public access. He seems to like know where they come from, and if he's not keeping them under control, he's at least like monitoring them, maybe. But also in Brindlewood Bay, his there's a couple of appearances theoretically of him in Brindlewood Bay, but the one that I think is most likely candidate is there's a sweep mystery called As the Crow Dies. And in As the Crow Dies, that is basically just the story of public access, but happening on a dream realm, right? The man in the sun mask, or the in my background, the sun-faced man, he is watching over these little children. And it's my theory that the little children in the garden of this dream scenario for Brindlewood Bay are the Great Hungers from public access. I don't know that for sure, but that's my theory. And so there's this sense that he's not just a wanderer, but he's also a warden of sorts. Like he's kind of overlooking something. So that's the Wanderer. The second character is the Great Wolf King. Not actually named that in anything that's published so far, but he will be. He is a big deal in Shadow Society, the second book of the Between. The Great Wolf King represents like a kind of primeval force, something that goes really, really far back. Evil, and has the aspect of a devourer, like someone who eats. There's a lot of like myth associated with wolves, particularly Native American myth, of this idea of the wolf as like a big-mouthed predator, right? It eats and consumes, right? And we see wolves, not just the Great Wolf King, but wolves in all of the games. There's a really strong like dogs are bad theory of the Brindleverse, or like wolves are always bad and dogs are often bad theory of the Brindleverse, because you get these like monstrosities and villains that all have like dog or wolf theming to them, right? They just appear everywhere. They're all once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it. Like you notice the wolves all over the place. And we've got like the Great Hungers are also called the Bone Wolves, for example. We have She That Feeds from public access. We have Mr. Big Bad from the whole Calamities line. My personal theory is that Mr. Big Bad and the Great Wolf King are the same character, and that She That Feeds might be like a different aspect of him. We have, there's so many. There's, there now that I can't think of any now, but like there are just wolves and bad dogs. Jack's killer dog in public access. Officer Barker. There's just this idea that like wolves are like this enemy force, and the Great Wolf King is one of them. In Shadow Society, we learn a lot more about the Great Wolf King. We learn, for example, we do learn a little bit in the core book too, but we learn that the Great Wolf King has been around since a time before history. We know that there were these warriors, or this order called the Keepers of the Flame. There's that fire imagery. The Keepers of the Flame went to war with him. This is a huge spoiler, but by the time of Shadow Society, by the time of London Between, We know that the Great Wolf King, that Hargrave House has him captured and imprisoned. He's imprisoned by Hargrave House, and and that's kind of the deal with him. We get a lot more of this like story of sun versus moon, fire versus wolves in Court of Wolves, which is one of the between settings. In Court of Wolves, our version of Louis XIV always wears a sun-shaped mask, and the mastermind always wears a moon-shaped mask, and they are. It is like the most like direct 1v1 conflict between like sun and moon in the Brindleverse. Like it's hinted at in other places, but here it's really, really direct. And this takes place, 100+ years before the events of Between London. And so I don't want to go any more into it than that, but I my theory is that they're connected characters. You can also interpret it that it's just a sort of like a thematic or a motif, that I'm kind of playing with. But my thinking is that there's a connection between those two characters and kind of what's going to happen in the future. So we got this sun versus moon, fire versus wolves kind of imagery, right? And this kind of these recurring characters. And I think that for a long, long time, the Wanderer had it all under control, had the Great Wolf King in check, was able to manage him on some level. And then Atticus Whately started fucking around with things in with cameras and started to thin the veil between worlds and sort of destabilize sort of everything that holds everything together. And I think that's when things started to really like go haywire. And that's when we start to get Brindlewood Bay, public access, pizza time. That's when all that stuff starts to go, right? Because Atticus Whately makes the Whately camera. The Whately camera has the ability to make contact with entities in other dimensions and maybe even allow you to travel to other dimensions. The Whately camera or some version of the Whately camera, maybe something using Atticus Whately's technology. Another Whately in the future takes it to New Mexico and makes TV Odyssey and further like creating more destabilization. And that leads eventually to Pizza Time. And in Pizza Time, we see the Great Wolf King on top because in that game, Mr. Big Bad, who's the main enemy of it, he's all over the place. Like he's free roaming, right? And it's the man in the sun mask who is trapped because he is in a little glass box as a fortune teller machine in the pizza restaurant. So there's this sense that like Atticus Whately kind of fucked it up, and now the Great Wolf King has sort of in the modern age is sort of what is ascendant at that time, right? And so that's sort of my big kind of unifying theory of the Brindleverse. There are so many problems with it, and there are so many extra things that I cannot explain. There are things I have not yet been able to figure out. I don't know what Greek myth has to do with it, because Greek myth is very prominent in a lot of what's going on in the Brindleverse. I don't understand I don't know how to make sense of what I call the Brindlewood Bay TV show paradox, because Atticus Whately did his work in Brindlewood Bay, but Brindlewood Bay is a TV show, and other things happen in Brindlewood Bay that are referenced in other parts of the world. But again, Brindlewood Bay is a TV show. Well, it can't all be a TV show, but Brindlewood Bay is a TV show. So what is going on there, right? Maybe the fact that it's a TV show has something to do with the Whately camera. I'm not really sure. But that's a big thing that I don't quite know how to explain in my theory. The Greek myth thing is a big wide open thing. And there's a few other entities that are around, and I don't know where they fit in yet. And I'm curious to hear people's thoughts. We have the Occluded King, who appears in, I think, 3 of the games. And he is maybe Hades, maybe not. We have Persephone, who is maybe the Persephone of myth, but maybe is some other kind of entity that the midwives of the Fragrant Void just think is Persephone. We have lots of like we have like pigs. So pigs make a lot of appearances, like evil pigs. Um, we definitely have things like the Fey realm and stuff like that. That is a truth in the universe. So there's a lot of other little things, but I think those three characters help create at least something of a timeline. And before I kind of leave that timeline, that conflict between the Keepers of the Flame, that ancient conflict, the Keepers of the Flame and the Great Wolf King, that conflict happened in prehistoric London and prehistoric New Mexico. That story happens in both places, right? And so it's interesting to me that Atticus Whately's descendant took his magic camera and left the East Coast and went to that same desert, right, to do whatever he's going to do. So it implies some understanding of things, right, which I think is interesting. So that's my kind of big picture theory. Like I said, I think that's pretty on. It's a roughly speaking, I think that's what's going on in my mind. But I can't explain a lot of it. And there's a lot of characters who make appearances who are intriguing, but I can't really say what they mean or where they fit in. So I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts on. Oh, and prehistoric France is a really good point. Yeah, I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts on like what's going on with it, Ray.
All right, I'm just going to throw this out here because this just came to mind. We have the Fey realm that cuts across a lot of these games. If folks are familiar with the Cottingley fairies, so the Cottingley fairies, it would be shortly after the Tween. It's 1917. It's a hoax where they photographed fairies to prove their existence. What if in the Brindleverse, fairies weren't part of reality until someone photographed one with the Whately camera, and then it retroactively fills in the timeline?
Well, we do have fairies in Court of Wolves, so that does mess up that part of the timeline, or at least that of that theory, because one of the player characters is like a Fey hostage in Louis the XIV's court.
Nice.
So yeah, yeah. So we know of it at least in that time. Yeah. It's cool though. I'm just going to go in the order on my screen. Jack, go ahead. You're muted.
How long would you say the TV show Brindlewood Bay has been going on? Like, would it have been airing in 2004? Like, would latchkeys have been watching it? Or is it something that's a bit more like present, recent, contemporary?
I mean, I like this meta idea that it's been going forever, and every time someone plays it, they do a new season of the show. But that's not a satisfying answer, I don't think. Why would you have? What were you thinking?
No, no, I'm just curious because it's obviously public access taps into that whole thing of nostalgia and television and broadcast, and they're in the same universe. But I'm just curious what we think. Like,
Yeah, could they be connected? Like, could like the
yeah,
Whateleys have made the Brindlewood Bay TV show or
yeah, or
something?
are the latchkeys watching it when they're not investigating things, or is it playing somewhere,
I've had that happen in game. It's not in any of the texts, but I've had in public access. I've had Brindlewood Baby playing on the TV. Yeah, I've done that. That's not. There's no there's no textual justification for that, but I think it's a fun idea. Yeah. Katic, what are your thoughts?
Okay, this is some thoughts that came up on the Discord earlier, but like the idea of perception is such a key and intrinsic like part of like the Brindleverse and like how everything is connected about when people see things and how people see things. And particularly, I've been thinking about the paradox, and I'm not sure who is watching Brindlewood Bay because like it's a TV show. It's not textually referenced in other CFB games as Brindlewood Bay, but rather stuff that is a subsection of it, such as cut to commercials and like those types of things. So I'm wondering on the layers of perception, is this a human TV show or is this something more like cosmic, like in terms like of a like a great old one or something equivalent
Mm,
watching this and then dreaming of the Brindleverse as like a
perception is so interesting as a theme, right?
Mhm.
Because you've got like the occluded king, which is like the whole king in shadows thing. It's a play, and like the performance of that play, like performance and perception and recording, and like it all kind of connects up, right? There's this idea of like we're putting on this performance, and so we're summoning this god, right? Like very King in Yellow, right? And obviously there's like the very clear TV references, and then going back technologically, the Waitley camera, like the idea of like capturing images or capturing a performance, like has some kind of power. There's huge amounts of like light and prism references in the games. Like in Beach Blanket Body Bag, the characters can find this chamber called the Prism Chamber, and the Prism Chamber exists in both public access and Beach Blanket Body Bag, but you don't unlock it for public access unless you play Beach Blanket Body Bag. It then unlocks in public access, and this chamber, when you're in it, it's all the prisms show you. They show you all the different ways that your life could have been or could be. Like it shows like alternate paths, basically. So yeah, the idea of perception is like really, really pronounced in the game, right? It's almost like it, and so much of like the cosmology of the Brindleverse is like wrapped up in like lenses, in perception, in performance, in yeah, it's intriguing.
Yeah. Yeah, it also like leads me into like what actually created whom. Like we've got like the idea of like, oh yeah, we've got the Waitleys who created this camera, but however the camera has been around longer than the Waitleys. And I'm just wondering like,
That's right, because the camera,
yeah,
the theory is that the camera's always been there. Atticus
yeah,
Waitley just sort of figured it out, right? But
yeah,
the camera's always the camera has always been around. Yeah,
yeah,
the prism, if you will. Yeah.
yeah. So like the concept of being able to like record images like has always been like his idea. I'm just wondering whether or not this idea of belief is enough to manifest like supernatural objects within the world. Because like I don't know what the big man is.
Right.
Like he's like this supernatural figure, and he always seems on humanity's side, which is a very odd thing in like cosmic horror stories, because like at best cosmic stuff is like indifferent. So I'm wondering if like the big man is a human creation as a result of belief.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, like a Tubla.
I think it's interesting that oh yeah, like Toolbar. I think it's interesting that the Wanderer, Big Man, Man in the Sun Mask. I think it's interesting that in the timeline he gets more and more like decrepit and weak, which I think is really fascinating, right? Which kind of helps my theory of this idea that the Great Wolf King is getting stronger and stronger, right? As the Great Wolf King gets stronger, the Wanderer gets more destitute and weaker. You know, Amanda.
Yeah, I like building on Ray's idea of in this is just messing with timelines and universes and all that weird time shit that doesn't make any sense when you sit down and think about it. But if there is, let's say the timeline is there were no Fae, and then Waitley camera arrives, takes a picture of Fae come into the world, retroactively change the timeline, and now there's Fae in France. I mean, who's to say things when the universes kind of overlap and collide like that, when the veil thins, it's only changing from the present into the future. It could change the past, right?
Oh, that's
there's no
interesting.
rules.
Be kind, rewind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
That makes the Odyssey tapes a lot more interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think that could be really fun to play with in terms of when you're theorizing at your table. Yeah, Jeremy Bearimy stuff. I also like to think of, I mentioned this in the Discord really, really shortly, but I also like to think of different characters that show up repeatedly, like the heads, Constance and Patience. I think there's another head.
There's three of them. Yeah, there's Constance,
three.
Patience, and Temperance.
Temperance.
Or is it Temperance?
Yes.
Yeah, Temperance.
Yeah. I think that the heads are a aspect of the Morrigan, They are
Oh.
like constant, inescapable presence that slips into people's lives and pokes and tests and interferes and delivers ominous little reminders and evil portents. And that, what is gossip if not that, right? Prophesizing bad things to come. They usually show up at the beginning of a game. I also think that Underwood, Periwinkle, Percy is an aspect of Dionysus. Very beautiful, effeminate, blurring gender expectations, theater and role play and disguise and ritual performance, embodying excess and sensuality and being very sexually open, that sort of thing. So those are my little like in my head. That's who these characters are.
The heads are either Morgans or they're a Hydra. Okay.
Oh, or both. Even worse.
I mean, somebody
Okay.
could tie them to Cerberus and
Yeah,
give them
yeah,
all
that's the other thing.
function.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Ben?
I was thinking is about the about when you're talking about these big sort of cosmological forces. One thing I've noticed is the cold ocean. I've been like thinking I've just been referring to it as like the Arctic Deep in my head. Like that's where Admiral Flag gets his thing. And then there's also now By Endurance We Conquer, and then watching the playthrough of Unsinkable. There's like, and then obviously Brindlewood Bay is on a bay and there's water. So like, how is like the ocean and everything? Do you think? I mean, it kind of counters the dry aridness of Lost Transmissions, but there's something I don't know about
No,
ocean and cold.
well, I definitely think there's something going on with the expedition of the Fang and the Chimera, right? Like something clearly happened with Flag and with those two ships, right? The Flag was originally the commander of one, and then later we see the second Fang in By Endurance We Conquer. I think something happened. Obviously, it's going to come down to like, if you have Flag in your campaign of the Between and what the group comes up with. But something I think is really interesting, just as a little tangent. I talked about this in Discord briefly, but I've got this like little sub theory that whenever the environment is cold, or like it's a cold part of the world, or like it's winter wherever it's at, that the man in the sun mask is a woman. I have this theory that the further the sun is away, that the wanderer actually changes genders. And I've got this like I've found like 5 or 6 characters who I think could be the wanderer that are women and they're in cold places. And so I don't know. I don't know. So I don't know like what the cold has to do with that in terms of like Flag and all them. But it's an interesting observation. Like clearly that's a part of the world where something happened, and it's sort of like but I think we just don't have like enough data, right? Because like By Endurance gives us the most in terms of like what Flag saw possibly, or what Flag encountered, and the Flag mastermind in Shadow Society will have a lot of that too. It does have a lot of that, but yeah, I just think I'm not sure. Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about how if the Whately camera, in some sense, has always existed and things can retroactively come into existence. So that might have been what happened with the Whately camera, is that it was created by Atticus Whately at the time that we think of it, but then retroactively somehow that caused things to happen in the past. But what I think would be interesting is to think about who might have wanted that camera to come into existence and how they might have been working in the shadows to instigate that.
Yeah, the Whately camera. There are several objects of power in the game. The Whately camera is one of them, and I think you could do a whole episode of this Brindleverse series on the objects of power, like where they came from, what they are, who has them at any given time. Hargrave House obviously is a big part of that. I think it's something we see in Ghosts of El Paso, is that for those of you who hadn't caught it, the founder of Hargrave House makes an appearance in Ghosts of El Paso, right? Lady Antonia Bathsheba Hargrave Steele, or she's got a lot of names. I can't remember all of them, but she's immortal, and she is there hunting down one of the objects. She's there trying to hunt down one of these objects of power. She's trying to get her hands on it, And the Whately camera, I've always interpreted the Whately camera as one of those objects, but I think that there are more of them, and I think that they come from like a place, right? Or they come from some sort of like time that we can't see anymore or something. I'm not sure, but yeah, Jack. You're muted, Jack.
I keep on doing that. Sorry. Um, so sort of going back to that little discussion about the man in the sun mask flipping gender, the further they get away from warmth and the sun. Um, so if we want to get really weird, um, so like Flag's whole thing, and by extension, the crew of the Fang, their whole thing is sort of like these sort of echoes uh, of malignant masculinity, right? Like the idea that like you're stuck in the cold and you're instead of like reaching out for each other for warmth, you sort of isolate and toughen up and become butch and man.
Bioendurance
Um,
is problematic father figures, the role playing game, right?
yeah. But what I find interesting though, and again, just getting a little abstract and a little weird. So in the tarot, the star is the woman who is pouring water in from the land into a lake. Traditionally, anyway, there's other interpretations, but like the most traditional version of the star is feminine archetype, and in its upright position, it is, creative and inspires healing and positivity. But when it's inverted, it is destructive. It is the idea of hopelessness and despair. Um, and with the star, I wonder too. Then also because we're talking about bodies of water, you have something like beach blanket body bag, which the red star features prominently in, and you have this whole body of water thing. I'm curious, and not no, this isn't really a question, but just sort of like posing it to others. Sort of what that relationship then extends to the idea that like water as this sort of mutable, flexible, floating thing that can either sort of coupled with the star and how they sort of interact with each other, the idea that it can either inspire or create despair. And clearly in someone like Flag or, the crew of the Fang, it inspires despair and inspires lashing out against femininity, against traditional sort of intimacy, because those are signs of weakness and drives them crazy. So they have to sort of retreat inward and uh, sort of isolate themselves within their own masculinity so that they can toughen up and become, the monsters that they end up being.
I love that. Somebody else can chime in. I have thoughts, but I'll let somebody else chime in.
So here's my theory about what Flag discovered in the Arctic and just what sort of like this idea, like in response of like discovering the thing, just kept on like engaging in ritualistic practices, pretty the occult, probably I imagine invoking like rituals of the dead and whatnot. Uh, I think I think there needs to be like a question of what is the afterlife like in the Brindleverse? Does it exist? And my current working theory is no, it does not. I don't I don't think ghosts are the spirits of the dead, but rather the sort of perception of the past and sort of an intense emotion as tied to the death from the living. So I think Flag just figured out that there was no afterlife because, like, again, like there are places in the world where the veils between worlds are very thin, and sometimes ideas can get stuck in them. So that's why you have like uh the quite uh the TV sets for public access and whatnot, like the PCs can end up in from time to time, and that sort of thing, because the ideas are just like you can end up in an idea.
I want to go back to the thing that Jack was
Mhm.
talking about briefly. This idea of like femininity and
Mhm.
the relationship of the star and the sun. I uh, I have always like well, so actually, I think it's interesting that in Beach Blanket Body Bag, the the branches are called the Red Star, like Jack points out, and that same Red Star is viewed in a subterranean portion of Sonny Gitano's home. Like there's an actual mural representation of it, and so that there's a clear connection between the Wanderer and the Red Star, the sun, right? But I think it's really, really interesting that the story of those branches that are called the Red Star is about like it's essentially like kind of like a sort of emotional and at the end physical violence towards femininity, right? Like it's about a woman, Darla Sunset, a young woman anyway, uh, who is who is like broken out of the sort of social norms and expectations of her and women of the time, and she's is more free. She's a more libertine, free person, but we see her being rejected by the group and ultimately killed, right? And so I don't know what that means, Jack, but I think it's fascinating that like I mean I wrote it so I should know, but I honestly I promise you I just was operating at a subconscious level when I wrote it. Like I was just letting the vibes happen in my head. I think it's interesting. I think because I think there's something interesting about this idea of like masculine energy, feminine energy, this idea of like creation, mystery. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. Like I said, we're all going to go crazy, but all which is just to say, I'm kind of with you on that, Jack. It's making me think like what it all means. So anyway, I don't know. Cassidy, what do you want to throw in?
I just had a thought about the objects of power being somewhere and being like given. It kind of reminds me of Greek mythology where the heroes are almost always given these mythical objects of power. And so I'm excited to see what more of those are.
Yeah, well, we have there's the St. Petersburg Mirror is one of them. The corset from Ghosts of El Paso is another. There are a few more that I can't think to hand, but it's like a whole collection of things, and Hargrave House is aware of all of them. That's important, right? The Greek myth connection is interesting though, Cassidy, because obviously Greek myth is a big part of this, and I have no idea where it fits into any of this. like, and that's at least partially my fault because I originally used Greek myth symbolism in Brindlewood Bay mostly because I just wanted like an aesthetic that was not pure Lovecraftian, you know? I wanted to do an aesthetic that was kind of different from the typical Lovecraftian aesthetic, the sort of mythos, Cthulhu mythos aesthetic. But as it kept going, we started to build it out more, right? Like there's this idea of mystery, Greek mystery cults in Massachusetts, and there's Hades or the occluded king, if you will, in opposition to Persephone, and their cults in opposition to each other, and like so it's a whole thing. But and it's interesting that the Greek myth parts of it really only appear in two places in the Brindleverse. All of Brindlewood Bay, and then the Whately camera in the between. Because in the Whately camera, the Olympian gods are there. There's a moment where you are meant to describe why you think the Olympian gods are watching you right now. And so the Whately camera was studied in Brindlewood Bay by Atticus Whately. That's in the game. And or is at least one of the possibilities of Brindlewood Bay. And then, of course, the Whately camera ends up over in London. But those are the two most pronounced, like, direct references to Greek myth. And I don't know what any of it means, but I think it's really interesting. I think it's really fascinating. All right, who has a contribution here or a response? Just go for it, Amanda.
Oh, mine's really, really quick. I know some people have used Apollo references when talking about the Man in the Sun mask.
I used to. I haven't done it lately, but I used
Not
to.
lately, yeah.
Yeah. Chaotic.
It depends on what which came first, because like I know like the timeline of things can go back and forth. This is why I think like it's more helpful to think the timeline as a spiral of events. But however, when we're reading the timeline, we're reading it like text on the line. So like even though stuff may be quote unquote earlier in the timeline, but happened later in humans' history, but that's a little bit of a tangent. Is the Greek myths a way to explore the entities outside of human reality, or is or did we come up with Greek myths that created the entities that exist out human reality? Like it's like a chicken and an egg sort of type of moment of which came first, because like that's like they are tied to one another, and I don't think that they can really be untangled at this point as being like benevolent type of creatures.
Brendan brings up a really good point in chat, and I just want to say it here so that people watching the video get it. That there's a lot of Greek stuff in Zagreus as well, which is true. That's one of the other appearances of the occluded king too. Incidentally, like the king in shadows, aka the occluded king, um, makes his appearances in Zagreus, in Exit Stage Death, and in the King in Shadows in the between. And there might be some other small references to him in other places, but those are the three big ones that I can recall. And I have always wondered. I've always wondered if the whole like Persephone, Hades, Greek myth thing was just bullshit. Like that these are just other entities who let humans think they're that, right? Like except the only thing that like butts up against that idea is that in the Whately camera threat there is a paint a scene question that introduces the idea that the Olympians are real. And so it but I still kind of hold on to the idea that I'm not sure the Persephone that the midwives worship and that the occluded king who makes his various appearances, I'm not sure they're the Persephone and Hades of myth. My sense is that there's something else, but I don't have any like direct proof of it though. Jack?
I've always sort of operated on a similar thing. I mean, when you look about mythology and the way that it sort of evolved, at least in the West, a lot of it is sort of trickled down from other sources. So you have, the Romans obviously took from the Greeks, and all that sort of distilled. You have Christ as a sort of a distilled version of an ancient deity, and what's it called? Zarathustra or whatever it's called.
Zarathustra.
Yeah, thank you. So my operating has always been sort of the idea that these are creatures that were nameless before. These were entities that were always nameless, and we've just sort of always ascribed them names. And so even the paint the scene in Whately Camera, when you're when you
It's
know
how
when
we
you're asked
interpret
to,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we call them Zeus, we call them Dionysus, but they've had many names before, they'll have many names after. Um, so I think there's, they are Zeus, but they are also whatever whoever calls them their name a name. They don't care enough about their titles. They're sort of just given them because they're omnipotent. They're always going to be here. They're not going to care about what this little insect called them 1 century versus what another insect called them 2,000 years later.
I
That's just
concur with
what.
that. Yeah, I concur with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, for in my own game Paradiso Rosso, the premise for the Sorrowful Sisters is that uh there was a second group of entities who saw people worshiping and said, oh well, let's get in on that. And so you've got people, or you've got these creatures who forced others to sort of worship them, to feed them. And I think it's a sort of similar situation with the Brindleverse, where it's, the midwives are worshiping Persephone. Um, and we've sort of beautified her, over the years to sort of make her more palatable. But in reality, she is just this grotesque monstrosity, just as all the other gods are, because we can't comprehend their real forms. It's a sort of cosmic horror thing.
Yeah, there's a part of me that always wonders if like the Great Wolf King or Mr. Big Bad or whatever we're gonna call him, if he's just like mask off, right? He's just like I'm done being whatever you think you need. I'm here to eat you, and that's that, you know. Michael.
So I'm curious about the chromatic desert and
Oh
whether
boy, we got 8 minutes.
I mean, whether there are any connections or Easter eggs in other published or upcoming games, or whether it's just a public
Um,
access only thing.
Briefly, Pizza Time. So I'll give you a big spoiler on Pizza Time. Huge spoiler. You should turn this off if you don't want to hear it, if you don't want to have that game spoiled for you in a big way. So Pizza Time is a sort of indirect sequel to Public Access. Some particular side characters in Public Access, uh, um, from Degoya County, at some point before the events of Public Access, but at some point they found this pizza restaurant, and they have Calamity Raccoons pizza restaurants all over the country. The only place they're never able to build one is in Degoya County. Every time they try, there's like a problem, and the construction doesn't go off. Like, they always say they can't get it built. But every other place they're able to build one, and the original one they build is in Minnesota, and it's also the last one. By the time Pizza Time starts, it's like in the 2020s, and all the other Calamities have closed, and the original Calamities is still the only one open. And it's basically like Mr. Big Bad's like throne, essentially. It's his cosmic throne, this particular pizza restaurant. And there's a way, it's not easy to do, but there's a way where you can peer behind the stage, so to speak, of the animatronics, and it takes you to the chromatic desert when you do that. There's also other ways you can explore. You can explore the chromatic desert. You can explore the realm of the occluded king, and you can explore the fragrant void, implying that they're three different places, right? A lot of people think that the chromatic desert and the fragrant void are the same place, but Pizza Time suggests they are not the same place. So that's worth noting as well. So. All right, I've got 5 minutes at least. I'll leave it going for a little while because I have to go get ready for my office hours. But I'll be here for 5 more minutes. I'll let you all keep chatting as long as you want, but I will have to take my Zoom back when my office hours starts. So, anything else for me, or any other thoughts, or anybody want a sneak peek into some things? Want to know anything
Sneak
about
peek
anything?
into Court of Wolves.
Yeah, so Court of Wolves, you are. Well, this is all from this from the back page. You're all members of the Black Cabinet, and your job is to protect King Louis XIV, essentially, while he does whatever he does to rule the world, essentially. But our version of King Louis is not insane, but he's definitely he's a weirdo. He's a weird guy. Our version of King Louis wears his sun mask all the time, never takes it off in public. And the mastermind, part of what you're trying to do in this game is you don't just have to confront the mastermind, you also have to unmask him. The mastermind is a person who operates outside of Versailles and who is in league with werewolves and other bad dogs, as well as Satanists, and is trying to topple King Louis, and he wears a moon-shaped mask. And so we get the most direct, presentation of this conflict between the sun and the moon idea, the fire versus the fires and wolves. You get this kind of really direct thing. It never says that, okay, King Louis XIV is the man in the sun mask. That's never stated anywhere, but you're meant to take in this idea that this is maybe in the Brindleverse, at this point in time, this was their next field of battle, essentially, right? Jack wrote all the threats, actually, so Jack can actually speak to some of that as well. I just wrote the playbooks and the mastermind, but it's about Satanism, it's about werewolves, and it's about a a king in a sun mask and a rival to the throne in a moon mask, and you have to uncover uh, who the man in the moon mask is, and you have to decide whether you're going to join him or you're going to stay loyal to Louis. And that's basically what it is. There's obviously a lot more details in the middle of that. You know, it's very much the between, but just in this different setting. But yeah, I think people are going to really like it. It's a different vibe, wouldn't you say, Jack? Too.
Yeah, it's a lot more I think whereas like, Ghost of El Paso is a little bit more tragic and Unthinkables sort of got this like I want to say like a sort of uh stately quality to it. There's something that I think we tried to achieve with this that's a bit more romantic
It's
and like
flamboyant. It's
flamboyant, yeah.
romantic. It's lush. You know, it's all
and
those things.
and also really grim.
Yeah, in its way.
Um, but to the point about this sort of being like the battlefield, there is no like wanderer type character, side
Yep.
character in this,
Mhm.
because this is sort of like a moment in time where that sort of wanderer character is being confronted by the sort of big bad or agent of big bad. And so it was important not to sort of overshadow that conflict that was happening. And so you're sort of in the middle. You're basically pawns in their battle. And at some point, you'll have to choose which side you actually end up being on.
My actual plays of the Between London, some of them I have included this detail that is suggestive of once they got the Great Wolf King under control, or once this like entity was under control, that they like in Europe they Hargrave House took custody of him essentially is what I've sort of like kind of implied in my actual plays. That's a little bit more pronounced in the text of London Between with the Great Wolf King stuff. But again, you don't need to like. I think it's important. Like you don't need to know that to play Court of Wolves, right? And nor do you like it's all, and ultimately players and keepers are going to make what they're going to make of it. But my interpretation is that the Great Wolf King is defeated in France in the 1700s or whenever it is, and is then uh, and Hargrave House takes custody of him. So yeah, because Hargrave House goes back really, really, really far. In fact, in another thing in Shadow Society, it's implied that these Keepers of the Flame, who are referenced in a couple of the games, this like prehistoric like enemy of the Great Wolf King or of the Bone Wolves or the Great Hungers or whatever we're going to call them, that it's strongly, strongly implied that that's like a proto version of Hargrave House, right? Whenever you do the kitchen location in the Hargrave House, the kitchen goes into the you're searching the kitchen and you're learning the ancient history of the land before recorded history. So yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
one of
yeah.
oh,
Oh no, go ahead.
oh, no, I was just going to give a little bit of a another sort of Court of Wolves tidbit, sort of tying in because one of the threats is She Who Feeds, and it goes into a bit of that Flamekeeper mythology as well as the what She Who Feeds might have been in the past, and uh, let's just say there might end up being a kaiju battle if you play your cards right.
Yes, I love it. Okay, I'm gonna head out, but I'll keep this going. I'll even keep it recording for a little while too, and I'll just trim off at the end um, whatever if once it goes dead air. But I'm gonna go get ready for my office hours. You all can keep chatting as you wish. But thanks for showing up. And Amanda, we should do more of these. We should figure out a way to do more Brindleverse lecture
We're gonna do it. Yeah,
series.
well, I'll be in contact.
All right, awesome. All right, bye y'all.
All right, Jason's left, so he can't stop me from giving a Between spoiler. Uh, for the Solarium for Hargrave House, I put a heavy suggestion that there is a Hargrave House not by that name, but on that exact site in Rome and Britain. So it's essentially they rebuilt it on top of a ancient former site.
Yeah, there's a lot of Hargrave House rooms coming in Shadow Society that go back into the history, like real far back into the history of Hargrave House. So we're going to be able to build lots of fun lore when we get that book out. I'm real excited for it.
Yeah, and then I'm hoping it inspires people to do other Sons of Another World settings, or even just mini short form games, or just explore all these little Easter eggs. All right, I'm gonna bounce out. I'll catch y'all later. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about interpreting this for my own game and like, you know, what because I want to like I love what Jason said at the beginning about how the Brindleverse isn't just his, like, and we shouldn't just count on officially Gauntlet published materials comprising the Brindleverse since it is such a community created thing. I'm like, oh, so like what could that mean for my game? Should I add some more divert references to it to let people draw connections?
That's the fun of it.
Yeah.
You can absolutely do that because it's like Jason said, it gets the lore gets built at the table. So
Hmm.
you're just handing people some ingredients. They get to make the dish that they get to devour. So I think that would be really fun.
Yeah.
This is fun. I got to run, but this is super fun. And yeah, I guess the cat's out of the bag now. Court of Wolves.
Yay.
So
Exciting.
excited, Jack. I'm so
It's
excited.
so cool.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I was trying to see if I could give away any other spoilers, but I think I'll save it for later. But yeah, I'm very excited for people to finally get into it. But it is
Well, I'm gonna head out too. Come to the
yeah.
Mummy in 2 hours.
Good what?
Bye. The Mummy.
Oh, okay.
Come to the Mummy. Join us at Mummy Palooza
Evan
2025.
Evan has decided to start a new tradition for the Sprigs and Kindling Writing Retreat, which is screening The Mummy 2017.
The one with Tom Cruise?
Yeah,
The one with Tom Cruise.
All right, party.
it's Evan's favorite movie.
I love
Clearly.
it. No, it's not. Please don't put that on me. Don't
But
put
it's
that
it's
on
re
me.
it's recorded now. Sorry.
Oh no.
There's
All right.
evidence of it. All right. See
There's
ya.
going to be on the Sprigs and Kindling YouTube. It's
Yeah,
probably gonna
don't
happen.
trim this part, Jason. Leave it in
No.
perpetuity.
All right. I'll see y'all later.
See you guys. Bye.
Yeah, guys.
Yeah, I think it looks like everyone's heading out. Thank you all for coming. Lovely to see you as always, and I hope you have a really great rest of the retreat, the last little bit.
Yeah, see you in the Mummy.
Bye.
Bye.